Well, my objective is to help protect pilots against corona. One of the most dangerous or easily ways to contact corona is from somebody you're within close proximity. And of course, the cockpit of a training plane gives you close proximity. So here are some materials you might use to protect yourself. The object is to convert a painter's mask or a respirator into a source of safe air. Particularly, I'd suggest you use a cartridge mask with an NIOSH 95 filter. Some plywood, hole cutters, drill bits, flexible tubing, ribbed or rubber or vinyl, electrician's tape, saw, T-connectors, X-Acto knife, inner tube, hot glue gun, a throat mic that's noise canceling, or a mic for a microphone that's noise canceling. Notice I specifically did not get into any dimensions for this because it depends upon the type mask you have. I haven't done this yet. I'm out of the country. I'm not near any of my tools or supplies. But this is something that you can turn an old painter's mask into without any trouble, theoretically. Continuing, I must add that you must, before you use this product or this mask, check with your health care provider and FAA representative. Make sure that the FAA doesn't have any objection to this. I'd like you to keep in mind that NIOSH 95 filters should provide excellent protection, but they cannot guarantee you 100% protection against the virus will be stopped. Those many websites think that they're very good against the virus. In addition to a NIOSH 95 filter, I recommend an outside air source connects directly to your mask, where you still maintain your filter, and that way you'll be filtering outside air, which would remove any possibility of getting the virus. Make sure the mask and all connections are airtight by testing them. Basically, you go to the end of your tubing. You'd have tubing that would connect to an outside air source. Put your hand over it or do something so air can't go through, and then try to breathe through the mask. And if no air comes through the mask is fitting you properly and all your connections are tight. Anyway, I'd clean the connection to the outside air source and any surfaces you'd be touching in the airplane. Finally, you need to wear safety equipment and follow all safety manufacturers' directions and procedures. In other words, the manufacturers of your tools that you're going to be using to make this. Again, for this list back here of supplies, depending upon what you choose to do, you won't necessarily need all of these. So let's look at the simplest option. And that's option 1, where you have a painter's mask, and this one has a round cartridge at the side, a NIOSH 95. That should protect you, but you need to talk, and you need to have a microphone inside the mask. The only thing is, you might hear a lot of your breathing on your headsets, and that might be a bit disturbing. So I'd recommend, if you can, get a throat mic, so you don't even have to put a hole in your mask. You just, it's a World War II type mic that just goes around the throat. Hopefully it's noise canceling. And if you choose to use your boom mic and put part of that in your mask, Obviously, you'd have to put a hole in the mask, but you have to make sure it's sealed up rather well. That's a possibility. Again, that's the simplest thing. Now let's look at another way where we make a transition to go from your NIOSH 95 cartridge to some flexible tubing that goes to the outside air source. Simple piece of plywood would do that. You get a hole cutting saw. It's the same diameter as the NIOSH cartridge up here. And then drill a hole in that and put a metal tube in the hole. Or possibly even a plastic PCV tube you might want to put in. And the flexible tubing would get connected to that. Of course, how do we attach that to the mask? Well, that's where an inner tube comes. You have to get the right size inner tube. Obviously, you want the diameter of the inner tube to be a bit less than this to have a nice tight fit. The yellow here represents the inner tube. The green represents the plywood that you'd cut out. And you have to decide what size hole you put in it, because ultimately it depends upon the size of the flexible tubing that's going to go into the mask. You got a right and left would go into a T connection. And obviously these two diameters, flexible tubing leaving the mask could be less than the one leaving the T. That needs to be about 40% greater diameter. And that would go to the outside air source. In a Cessna, they're nice. They're right by the wing root at the top of the windshield, one on the right, one on the left. Square opening, so you could seal that up without too much trouble and to connect this. I don't even think it would really have to be airtight. Just connect it. Doesn't matter if any extra air comes in unless it's cold in the winter. But this represents a T, this red piece over here. If you wrap some wire around this, tie the wire around tightly, that will keep the flexible tubing from coming off. Or you could use some wire ties. It'd probably work as well, plastic wire ties. Here's another view where this green represents the plywood with a metal tube put in. And again, it all depends on the size tubing you have here. You'd want tubing to be about as thick as a diver's snorkel. That is, this diameter would have to be as thick as a diver's snorkel. This could be a little bit less. That would assure you'd have plenty of air. Maybe even make it smaller, because sitting still, you aren't going to have that as much. You aren't going to need as much air as a diver. But here you see the rubber tubing connects to the green transition. Maybe even some vinyl electrical tape would help hold this in place better. You'd have to see, or twist wire around. I'd have the tire tube overlap a little bit. Might have to work at it. Again, here's another view of your mic, your exhaust. Here's the other side. So that's a bit more involved, as you can see. Again, I have a possibility of a mic mask in here, but I really don't recommend it. I don't know if you're going to hear all your breathing or not, so I'd recommend a throat mic if possible. Now, the only trouble is lately you don't have many of these round cartridges. They're tending to go to this irregularly shaped cartridge. The idea is to give you a better view. Although you still should be able to use the same, or you still should be able to use an inner tube to connect the two. If not, be a little tricky. I did find that, like with a painter's mask, they have a plastic cover over these, and under the cover you have a pre-filter. Well, the plastic cover I don't think is airtight, so you probably have to remove the plastic cover in your pre-filter, and that way you'd should have a good airtight connection. Last but not least, and this is probably the best way to go, is simply to buy an oxygen mask. Okay, they're about $450. They contain a mic inside. You'd also have to buy an oxygen bottle, and God knows how much it's going to cost you, because I think you'd probably use about 200 liters an hour, and who knows where it's available. Well, I hope this helps. Be careful and stay healthy.